The shadow economy or the underground economy does tell us something that's relevant for traditional markets as well. Scrap has value. Across the U.S., states are ramping up efforts to crack down on catalytic converter theft. That's right, we're talking about car parts here. So why am I bringing this up? It's got a lot of people talking about the circular economy, and it's a perfect example of where we should be paying attention to right now. A conversation well worth your 10 minutes right here on UBS Trending. Hi, everyone, and welcome to UBS Trending. I'm your host, Anthony Pastore. Michelle Liberty is back in the studio with me and my guest for today. A really interesting story that you are talking about here, Michelle, about catalytic converter theft, but it's not just about that. It also has implications for investors, which we're going to get into here in a minute. So welcome, by the way.
Thanks for having me.
So just as to put context on this, only recently had I started hearing about catalytic converter theft. For those who are not aware, it's a car part. It has to do with the exhaust system on a conventional car. And recently, in my neighborhood in Astoria, Queens, the police have been leaving letters or notes on people's cars saying, beware or be aware of catalytic converter theft. So what's going on here?
Yeah, it's a great question, and to put it really simply, scrap does have value, as you mentioned, and there's a lot of material in car parts, specifically catalytic converters. And we also agree that there's value in commodities. We don't recommend you participate in illegal markets, but for legal investors out there, we do agree that commodities have value. We actually recently upgraded commodities as an asset class, and we also raised our price target on copper. So the bad news is if you do have a vehicle, those catalytic converters are probably going to stay valuable for the foreseeable future. And we've actually seen them become more valuable with the rise of hybrid vehicles, because a purely electric vehicle does not have a catalytic converter, but a hybrid vehicle actually has a more expensive catalytic converter than a traditional internal combustion engine.
Mm-hmm.
So while the traditional catalytic converter can get anything from maybe $25 to a couple $100 at a scrapyard, a hybrid catalytic converter can fetch up to $1,400.
Wow.
So we are seeing, as commodity prices have risen, theft has picked up alongside it.
Right, so Michelle and I aren't advocating here to tell you to go steal catalytic converters out of your neighbor's cars or from scrap yards, but it does bring us to a really interesting part of the conversation, which shows that corporations are getting in on the game, obviously not stealing these things, but they're seeing the value here. And just by the way, in your report, you wrote that catalytic converter theft has risen over 400% since 2019, when we started to see commodity prices go higher. So then we go back to that. Why are companies and larger corporations paying attention to this story?
Yeah, it's a great point, because criminals are no longer the only ones seeing the value here. And scrapyards are not a new concept, right? Same as thrifting. These have been around for some time. I actually grew up in a family, my dad does demolition, so I'm very well aware of the material and value in recycling. Mm-hmm. But we are seeing renewed interest from these larger corporations, because in order to meet the targets that they've put out there and to keep up with increasing regulation, they're likely to need more recycled material.
Yeah, we were talking about stooping, and for maybe it's a New York thing, I'm not 100% sure, but stooping is when it's the old expression, one man's trash is another man's treasure. You put I got rid of a dresser a few years ago, and as I was bringing it down the stairs, my neighbor literally said to me, "Are you getting rid of that? Because I would love to take it." And I said, "Sure, take it. It's just get it off my hand." She wanted to offer me money. I said, "But no." But people stoop all the time. You were talking about stooping and getting 1950s style bar stools from a local bar that was getting rid of them for nothing, and that's happening all the time. We talk about thrift stores, and that's a big part of the circular economy that you're talking a lot about lately.
Yeah, and it's just these targets that companies have put out. A lot of larger corporations have been telling us, and by us I mean both investors and consumers, they've been telling us really broadly three things: that they're going to cut emissions by shifting to renewables or diversifying their energy mix. Two, that they're going to electrify transport, whether it's by selling EVs or by using them in their own fleet. And then three, cutting waste, right? We've heard a lot of commitments about cutting down on plastic waste, particularly from large consumer companies that put a lot of the plastic waste out there. But if you want to make that happen, chances are you're going to need more material and more recycled material. And why is that? An electric vehicle actually uses about 6 times the minerals as a traditional combustion engine vehicle. A wind plant uses about 9 times the minerals as a traditional gas-fired plant. And then for plastic waste specifically, as corporations look to cut down on the use of virgin plastic material, what they're doing is committing to using more recycled material. But the supply of recycled PET plastic really is not enough at this point to meet that demand. So all of that tells me that they're going to need more minerals and more recycled content.
Right. And by the way, we do have a chart that you put in a recent report that shows the differences between the minerals used in an EV, an electric car, versus a conventional car. So we'll get that up in a second. But let me take that a step further with you. How are companies now innovating, considering that they do have to get more materials, looking to be more recycled materials, but how can they innovate to make recycling and reuse easier? What are they doing here?
Yeah, it's a great question. So one thing that we're seeing is a lot of effort to increase the efficiency of a recycled battery. But outside of that, we're also seeing new initiatives like, for example, once a battery can no longer power an electric vehicle, maybe doesn't have enough capacity left to run that car, but it still has enough capacity to store energy, say for a home or maybe a smaller building. So there's still that case where it could be used again in a second life. And we're starting to see companies really play into that. What we're also seeing is a lot of investment in advanced or chemical recycling. I mentioned that we need more supply of recycled PET. Unfortunately, not all plastic is recyclable.
Right.
So with traditional methods, black plastic or colored plastic, for example, is very hard to recycle. But with chemical or advanced recycling, where we are seeing investment, that should be able to take care of that type of plastic as well. So.
Right.
Really a lot of innovation here. I think we're starting to just on the cusp of companies realizing just how valuable recycling and all this material could be.
Right, and it looks like companies are really starting to get more and more on board with the idea of the circular economy, because if you look at the utilization of materials, it's likely to come up short because of emission issues, which is something that we're all paying attention to for obvious reasons as we look at climate. But let me ask you this, Michelle. For an investor here, and we're talking about true legal investing, not stealing car parts, what can investors do to tap into this story?
Sure. So outside of the tactical preference for commodities that I just mentioned, longer-term investors can also tap into some of these innovative companies as well. There are some opportunities in public markets, but if you do have the time horizon and the appropriate risk tolerance, there's also some opportunity in private markets as well that can help you get exposure to some of the earliest stage innovators.
Terrific. And I know the CIO recently upgraded commodities to overweight, so that has a lot to do also with this particular story. Michelle, thank you. And by the way, I don't know if you know this, but there are now catalytic converter anti-theft devices that anyone could buy for their vehicle. You can buy it on various websites, auto parts stores. So it's catching on. So, I guess the criminals are going to have to look elsewhere for their parts if people take care of not letting them be stolen out of their vehicles. But this is a really fascinating story. So it's lessons from the shadow economy, as you put it in that blog that you released. Thank you, Michelle. Great stuff. And I didn't know you came from a demolition family, so you really have a lifelong interest in this particular topic. It's pretty cool.
Oh yeah, I actually grew up in a house with much recycled material, refurbished beams, reused windows, so definitely something that I didn't appreciate at the time, but I appreciate more now.
Especially now as an adult living in New York City and looking to get, to reuse materials that will benefit you, and also it's great for the circular economy as well. Michelle, thank you very much. Good to see you.
Thanks for having me.
And for more information from Michelle and the rest of the Chief Investment Office, visit ubs.com/views, and you can also follow UBS on social media. We are on all of the platforms, plus you can check out all of our past UBS Trending episodes on demand and on the UBS YouTube channel. And as we always say, if you have any questions about your portfolio or anything Michelle and I spoke about today, make sure to reach out to your financial advisor. Until next time, I'm Anthony Pastore. We hope you have a great rest of your day. And remember to keep your eyes on what's trending. We'll see you soon, everybody.